Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Boxcast Boxing Podcast. I'm your host, Cisco Rodriguez. Today we're going to be taking a look at some of the fights that happened last week, some upcoming fights, and kind of go over what our schedule is going to be like as we move on into a very busy month for boxing. Um, let's just go ahead and jump right into what happened last week. Last week in boxing, basically there were a couple fights over the weekend of the March 26th. We had Berchelt losing. This is probably the biggest thing that happened. Berchelt lost um, in his debut at 135 at the lightweight division against Nakatali. Uh, sorry, Nakat- Nakatila. Sorry. Um, his upset loss really was interesting considering he lost to a guy that um, Shakur Stevenson didn't get him out, but he really didn't touch Stevenson. I mean, honestly, Stevenson gave him a boxing clinic in fairness, and the fact that this guy just bodied Berchelt like that, I think says a lot about Stevenson. I think says a lot about this guy. I think says a lot about Valdez. All that's going to be answered pretty soon here, though. Once Valdez and Stevenson go at it, we're going to find out if Valdez was the real deal and he took something out of Berchelt. Maybe Berchelt wasn't that real. I mean, he's Berchelt's obviously a world champion. He's a world class fighter. But maybe he wasn't a great. Maybe he wasn't great, and Valdez and Nakatila just exposed him. And if that's the case, I give a lot. I think that Shakur's gonna have a lot easier time with Valdez than what we expected. I personally think Valdez is gonna give Shakur a lot more trouble than people are expecting. I don't think Shakur's fought anyone with the power that Valdez has, that one punch power that can come from anywhere. I think Eddie Reynoso has probably been working him like crazy. I think we're gonna see a much cleaner Valdez, a much more careful, collected Valdez, who is looking for that big shot. Because I don't know. We haven't seen Shakur's chin tested by a Valdez, and I think anything can happen in boxing. All it takes is one punch. So I think Valdez is going to give Stevenson a little more trouble than people are giving him credit for. I think it's basically an even fight heading in. And if someone were to ask me to bet some money, and I think the odds are going to be pretty close, I might take the upset on this one. So just so you guys know, that's kind of what I took out of that Berchelt fight. And then hopefully Nakatila comes back with a good fight. Hopefully he gets a good payday taking out Berchelt immediately at 135. So hopefully he gets one of these guys, maybe a Linares, something like that to get him going. Or Ryan and Tank aren't gonna fight anybody, so maybe they'll fight him. Who knows? Um, Next up, another fight that happened over the weekend. Tim Zhao won his U.S. debut. Um, following in the footsteps of his dad, he's coming to conquer the U.S. He's gonna try to conquer the U.S. He won by unanimous decision. Fight was kind of close. I don't think there's any disagreement that Tim Zhao won that fight. Um, was he overly impressive? Not really, but did he get the job done? Yeah, and I think he has a style that a lot of U.S. fans will be friendly to. Um, it's hard to tell if he's the real deal yet, though. One of these top level fights might top level guys might just destroy him. Um, well, that Warrington fight too was wow. That also happened this weekend. That was kind of a boring fight, honestly. Kiko looked like damaged goods, honestly. Warrington, I still don't know if he beats Lara. That's a tough rematch if they were to do that. I just don't know if Warrington has it in him to beat someone that good. And no disrespect to him, I don't see that. I don't see him coming back and giving those guys a run for their money. He beat Kiko, great, okay. I still think he gets beaten by Lara, but okay. It was announced recently that Devin Haney will be facing George Kambosos on June 5th in Australia. This is a fantastic match. Another match where I think the underdog is being overlooked. I think Kambosos proved to us that you shouldn't overlook an underdog after what he did to Teofimo Lopez. And I know there's all these excuses that you could say. You could say Teo belongs at 140. You could say, he had a medical condition. You could say this. You could say that. You didn't take him seriously enough. Haney's not going to do that. Haney's going to be healthy, all that stuff. Well, before you go there, Haney also belongs at 140. And I think Haney does take Kambosos light. And honestly, Kambosos not only went 12 rounds and beat Teofimo Lopez most of those 12 rounds. I think the Kambosos Teo fight was a more uneven. So I'm saying the Loma Teo fight was closer than the Teo Kambosos fight. And what I'll say is Kambosos knocked down Teo in the first round. I think Kambosos has power. And the training I see, Kambosos taking this seriously. He hasn't taken a break yet. He didn't take a gimme fighter for Australia to sell to a huge crowd in Australia. He's taken Devin Haney. This guy's favorite above him. And man, I'm not counting Kambosos out of this fight. I think he comes back. I think there's basically two options I see for this fight. Kambosos really pressures Haney and lands that overhand that he knocked Teo down with. Maybe even gets the stoppage on Haney if he keeps pressuring him with that kind of overwhelming rate of fire, or Haney makes this a boring boxing match where he really takes his time, stays on the outside, lands a couple when he can get in, and just dances around Kambosos and picks up 7 or 8 rounds. I could see that happening too. I just think that if Kambosos is able to bring it, we're in for an exciting fight. That Kambosos might win, if I'm being completely honest. I mean, don't count the kid out. Great boxing coming up. We're gonna go over the schedule here in a minute, but I just wanted to take a minute to appreciate our lightweight champion, George Kambosos. Recently, Dan Rafael posted an article where he talked about needing more fighters like George Kambosos. And basically his point there is Kambosos is the type of guy who came out, got probably the hardest fight of his life in Teofimo Lopez, brought it all to the table, won the title. He could have taken any opportunity to say, I'm not going to fight for a year. I'm going to walk around, I'm going to do media interviews, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to spend time with family, and I'm going to collect on my next big payday against a nobody. I know a lot of fighters that would do that right now. There's a lot of people that have proven that they'll do that. I mean, I'm not saying they're fighting nobodies all the time, but Crawford, Spence, they've both had their titles. They've both been the most anticipated fight for at least 3 years now, and they can't make it happen. Well, Kambosos is over here, one undisputed, immediately is fighting the next champion, the next guy that everybody wants him to fight. He was going to fight Lomachenko, sure, which I think is just as good a fight, honestly. Just as tough a fight for Kambosos. In fact, I think Lomachenko still maybe beats everybody in that lightweight division. But that's beside the point. I've always got a little bit of a bias for Lomachenko, but let's throw some praise at the champ, George Kambosos. He is the man right now. He's fighting everybody who wants to fight. There's only 2 fighters in the world that I can say that about, that they will fight anybody, and I truly believe that. I believe they will move weight. They will do whatever it takes to make the best fights happen. I believe that's George Kambosos, and I believe that is Showtime Sean Porter. So nothing but praise for those 2 fighters. They are going to be this month's Fighter of the Year or Fighter of the Month collectively. March Fighter of the Month is George Kambosos and Showtime Sean Porter. And that's mostly just so I can get it out there and tell everybody, how much I appreciate fighters like that. So let's go ahead. Let's review the upcoming fight schedule, as well as our podcast schedule. For those of you who don't know, this upcoming weekend, this first weekend of April 1st, is going to be kind of a slow weekend, not a lot of interesting boxing going on. What we do have going on is WrestleMania season, so look out for a WrestleMania special featuring a friend of mine, Joey. He will be on the podcast so we can go over some famous boxers, heavyweight boxers, who have been to WrestleMania or other WWE events. That includes Muhammad Ali, who is, of course, at WrestleMania, Mike Tyson, who is, of course, at WrestleMania, and Tyson Fury, who fought Braun Strowman, I believe, in Saudi Arabia, in some event they did over there. So we'll be talking about some of those matches, some kind of who had the best impact in WWE, and we'll also maybe throw some predictions out for WrestleMania. It'll be it'll be a fun little podcast, not boxing related. Don't worry, it won't be as cringe as the non-boxing related podcast Chris Mannix did with Sergio Mora about the slap heard around the world. I didn't need those guys' opinion on Will Smith slapping Chris Rock at the Oscars. That was whatever. I do like listening to Chris Mannix's boxing podcast. I think he's great. I think he's a cool guy. No, didn't mean to throw so much shade at him last week and this week, but that was a little bit cringe. And I like to call it like I see it in boxing. Anyway, following weekend after that, April 8th, we'll be talking about some of the results from WrestleMania, maybe a little bit. We'll talk about Ryan Garcia's upcoming return fight on April 9th, which will also have Gabe Rosado and Mosley on the undercard. Golovkin will also be fighting Murata that same day, April 9th. We will be talking about that fight as well as the lead up to that fight. And Mayer versus Hahn, which should be a fun fight to watch as well. We'll be talking about that, the build up to that, as well as UFC 273. We'll be talking about as we move on to April 15th. We will be talking about the previous week's results. So all those fights that go down, we'll be talking about kind of the landscape of boxing with those winners. We'll be talking about Spence Ugas, which will be taking place April 16th. What is next for them, and a potential Crawford showdown between the winner. Also, Cruz versus Gamboa will be an interesting fight to watch that weekend as well. We may talk about the UFC standings and some upcoming UFC fights. We'll also be discussing our thoughts on Jake Paul and the other YouTuber events such as Creator Clash, what we think of each event, our opinion on Jake Paul and what he's done for boxing that week. So that'll be an interesting conversation to have. Maybe if that conversation gets off the rails or something, we might do a live stream so we could all talk about what Jake Paul means to boxing. Anyway, April 22nd, we'll be talking about the previous week's results, talking about kind of where that welterweight division lies and how Cruz maybe did against Gamboa. We'll also be talking about the upcoming fight between Tyson Fury and Dillian White, which should be April 23rd, I believe. A really cool, really fun heavyweight showdown that'll kind of set Tyson Fury up to fight, hopefully the winner of Joshua Usyk, but we'll see. April 29th, we'll be talking about the previous week's results. Stevenson Valdez and Serrano Taylor, which should be two fantastic fights. If there's any fights that I've talked about so far leading up, if there's any day you should set aside to watch boxing, it is that April 30th where Stevenson Valdez, Serrano Taylor will both be great, amazing main events with I'm sure fun undercards. On May 6th, we'll be talking about the results of those two cards, as well as the upcoming Canelo Bivol fight for May 7th, and some UFC 274 stuff as well. Finally, May 13th, we'll go over the results of Canelo Bivol. We'll talk about that Creator Clash coming up, and then we'll go over Charlo versus Castano too, which should also be another interesting fight. Going out through May, we'll kind of be going over the results of the previous week. We've got Benavidez versus Lemieux May 21st, so we'll be talking about that leading up there. And then May 28th, we've got Gervonta Davis versus Roland, allegedly accused of sexual assault Romero. So that's kind of the show you can be looking out for in the future. Some really great boxing, honestly. Really, every week you've got a fight that's interesting after this weekend. So I would really be paying attention, and even past that, June 5th, Kambosos Devin Haney, going to be a great fight. So just keep an eye on the podcast. We may do little episodes in between, like this one that we're doing today. Kind of a random one. You can expect us to be releasing another one within the next couple days, going over that WrestleMania stuff. So I just wanted to say thank you guys for watching so much this episode of the podcast. Like, comment, subscribe. We should have this episode up on Spotify and YouTube by the end of next weekend. So by the end of next weekend, they should be coming out on Spotify and YouTube, hopefully, if I can get that sorted out. They'll always be on YouTube. Every Friday will be an episode with some bonus episodes I'll announce on Twitter. The bonus episode will be a little shorter, like this 15-minute or so episode. We won't be going over necessarily huge results or anything, but we'll be going over upcoming stuff and that kind of thing. So I hope you guys enjoy the WrestleMania stuff this weekend. We'll be back to boxing the weekend after, and I look forward to seeing how you guys react to some of the guests we bring on. So again, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you guys soon.